ocean road to Japan.
From Pearl Harbor on the night of October 23rd, Admiral Nimitz radioed a message to the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. The Second Battle of the Philippines had begun. For the men of the Third Fleet, this was the climax to a battle they had been waging for months. The men who were over Saipan in June, Guam in July, Palau in September, were moving west. They were hitting hard all over the map, all around the clock. Army and Navy flyers had pounded Japanese defenses from one end to the other, but they all pointed toward one day, October 19, and one target, the Philippines. The invasion force was protected by our mighty 3rd and 7th Fleets. The 100,000 GIs didn't know where they were heading, but they knew it would be the last place the Japs wanted them to go. There were hundreds of islands to pick from, and the enemy couldn't watch them all. It wasn't to be Luzon, where we fought our heroic delaying action at Bataan and Corregidor. It wasn't to be Mindanao, where Philippine guerrillas have never ceased fighting. Instead, our Joint Chiefs of Staff had chosen an inconspicuous island with a name most Americans had never heard. But overnight, it would be spoken in the same breath with the Coral Sea, Midway, and Guadalcanal, Leyte. America was ready to fulfill her promise, return to the Philippines. The 6th Army hit Philippine beaches and fought inland. Liberation of 16 million Filipinos was on the march, led by General MacArthur and President Osmeña. Back home, Americans read the optimistic headlines and thought the worst was over. But the Navy knew the main event was still to be fought. This was the day our Navy had been waiting for. But it was also the day for which the Japanese High Command had been waiting. For they knew they were sending this battle fleet against us with the odds as high in their favor as they would ever be. Their supply lines were shorter, their fleet had been resting in home waters, and could be supported by hundreds of land-based planes.
今や我が帝国の威力により警敵米国海軍を彼らは我が守るべき街道にあろう我が飛行隊がもはや敵艦隊は我が内防線に侵入しつつあり
In the language of military men, our Army was committed to this action. This was the fateful moment of every invasion, when a mighty army stands with one foot on land and the other in the sea. Knowing this, the Japanese were ready to unfold their master plan.
A crushing pincer movement of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers will navigate the narrow approaches to the American beachhead, cutting MacArthur off from his supply lines and destroying naval support. And, in addition, we have planned another surprise.
Before they reached the approaches to Leyte, the Japs lost the important element of surprise. Our submarine, searching deep in enemy waters, surfaced right in the middle of the Japanese fleet, broke radio silence to flash back the report. And that's not all they did. They sank 2 Japanese cruisers. The Navy had eyes above the sea as well. We knew what was coming and where it was coming from. And our carriers lost no time dispatching a reception committee. Hour after hour, the 2 oncoming Japanese forces forming the pincers ran a gauntlet of bombs, torpedoes, and tracer fire, and then, under cover of darkness, our destroyers crept into Surigao Strait under the big guns of the Jap southern force and let go their torpedoes. The PTs were there too with more feet. It was a rugged trip through both straits for the Emperor's invincible forces, but they fought on, determined to break through. As the jaws of the pincers kept closing, Admiral Kincaid had to make a vital decision. By 3 a.m., this southern prong of the Jap pincer was going to be too close to our beachhead for comfort. The Admiral decided to concentrate his main firepower down here and hit them from all sides as they came into the Gulf. Meanwhile, Admiral Sprague was holding his light carrier force here to guard our right flank. Then, if everything went right, we could knock out this southern threat in time to protect our beachhead from their big battleship task force fighting its way around Samar. Admiral Halsey would be rushing up to hurl his 3rd Fleet against a new Japanese surprise party reported bearing down from the north. Ready to blast the southern section of the Tokyo Express were 5 battleships the Japs had never expected to face again. The California, the West Virginia, the Pennsylvania, the Maryland, the Tennessee. The old battle wagons that had lain in muddy humiliation at Pearl Harbor were waiting for revenge.
Bearing 273.
Bearing 273.
Range 12500.
Range 12500.
Coming on target, sir.
Permission to open fire, sir.
Fire when ready.
The first salvos were fired at a range of over 25,000 yards, nearly 13 miles, and scored a direct hit. That's American gunnery, laying our main batteries on a moving target in the dead of night. The ships were down for the heaviest surface action of World War II. By 5 a.m., the southern enemy force turned and fled. That is, all but 10 warships, which reached the Gulf of Leyte, the bottom of the Gulf. While the lower prong of the enemy pincer was being smashed, the upper prong was closing in through San Bernardino Strait, led by Japan's newest, fastest battleships. This force had been pounded and straight until it turned back, only to come on again in one last fanatical attempt to smash through to our beachhead. Nothing stood between them and their objective except a group of low-speed, unarmored baby flat tops, screened by a handful of destroyers and destroyer escorts. The powerful 16 and 14-inch guns of these Japanese dreadnoughts were leveled against the light batteries of our escort vessels. Never outfought, but outgunned, outnumbered, outmatched, our jeep carriers radioed for help to Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet in the north. Admiral Halsey had to make a difficult decision. Should he go to the rescue and ignore the surprise from the north? Should he hold his position and leave our small force off Samar to fight overwhelming odds? The Admiral did neither. Instead, he kept the main units of his powerful command on its course, but dispatched a carrier group to the Samar battle area. Facing the murderous barrage of the Jap heavyweights at point-blank range, these little ships, fighting a desperate battle for time, used everything in the book to stay afloat and never stopped firing until the sea closed over four of them. A grateful people will remember their names. The Gambier Bay, the USS Hull, the Johnston, the Samuel B. Roberts. Theirs is a new and valiant chapter in our naval history. On the dawn of the third day, while the battle was still raging in the south, the curtain was rising in the north on another phase of this great naval engagement. Sweeping down from Japanese home waters came this third great enemy force, supported by waves of land-based bombers, dedicated to the imperial mission of striking the finishing blow for Hirohito. The Japs were flinging on the board of war their highest stakes, their future as a naval power. Once again, our fighting men rose up to meet the enemy. Even the men of the sunken Princeton fought on from other decks. Our pilots swarmed from more carriers than the Japs had ever seen before to knock the enemy out of the sky, blast them from the sea. Below them was the Japanese fleet. This was it. Of them, but you can't get them all. Sometimes we had to fight fire and Japs at the same time. Some of ours had trouble up there, too. But for every one they crippled, more were taking off. Zigzagged crazily, but there was no place in the Philippine Sea this day where they could hide from the most devastating attack ever launched in the Pacific. Enemy ship that still had a rudder was doing its best to turn and run for home. For even while thousands of Japs were being fished out of the very waters they had considered their own private sea, our fleet was hunting down the remnants of 3 Imperial forces. And as night fell on the last day of battle, this was all that would ever be seen of 24 Japanese warships and 400 enemy planes. 35 more warships were sinking or straggling home.
For every victory, men must die. It was battle-smashed planes like these that told the story of that victory eloquently. For here in this plane, damaged beyond repair, an American airman died at his battle station. His shipmates felt it fitting that he be buried this way. For now, let him be nameless. Let him be all the sons of America who have died for our cause. Let his death make that cause all the more precious to us, the living. 1944, with the enemy wounded but desperately rebuilding his fleet for a savage defense of his island fortress. Our course is set for 1945, pointing past Leyte and Mindoro, beyond the Philippines, to Japan itself. A dangerous foe that again and again must be brought to action.
Each white box contains the remains of a Japanese soldier, sailor, or airman. The Japanese dead are being returned to the homeland. In a land where the military dominates the Japanese religion, the militarist has this explanation of death. In our struggle against the enemy's industrial resources, we must put our spirits and bodies against American steel. Death is necessary for victory. In a land where the military dominates the press, victory is worshipped and defeat is not mentioned. Only the highest officials know that Japan has been reversed at Midway and New Guinea. A spokesman of the General Staff says, "The only thing we fear is that the enemy will not come out to do battle. The Pacific is a Japanese lake through which we can travel with impunity." This is not solely boasting. In 1943, American propaganda has overplayed the Japanese defeats and underplayed the Japanese victories. For the Pacific is a Japanese lake. The Marianas are Japanese. The Philippines are Japanese. The Marshalls are Japanese. The Gilberts are Japanese. Only in New Guinea and the Solomons are the Allies resisting. Of all the Allied surface weapons, only one is sufficiently strong to venture into Japanese territory: the American aircraft carrier. Since Pearl Harbor and Midway, the aircraft carrier is the dominant silhouette of the seas.
An aircraft carrier is a landing strip moving at 30 knots into the wind. Carrier landing requires practice and skill. It takes teamwork between the pilots and the deck crew. Flaps down, the resting gear down, power on. Both eyes on the landing signal officer. The technique is to keep the nose high and the tail low so the tail hook will catch one of the wires stretched across the deck. There's a slot that leads down the center of the deck, and the landing signal officer's job is to see that you come up to groove. Pick up your wing. Set it down easy. Cut your power. Out of the groove, waved off. A little high, but within limits. Bad landing coming up. He bounces over the deck wires and hits the barrier that protects the aircraft parked forward. Farther down the deck, the plane directors do a ballet underneath the propellers of the parking airplanes. Not an inch of deck space can be wasted. the wings. You're home.
November 1943. The Pacific Fleet is being ordered into its greatest offensive action to date. For 3 days, the big carriers lay to refueling. In safe waters, fuel oil, aviation gas, and supplies come aboard. Now from Hawaii and New Zealand, from San Diego, Pearl Harbor, Samoa, and Guadalcanal, the task force assembles. The whole armada covers 50 square miles of ocean. The fleet is steaming to an island of only 290 acres, Tarawa. Here is our objective, Tarawa and its airstrip. Control of Tarawa means control of the Gilbert Islands. Control of the Gilberts means bases from which we can invade the Marshalls. Control of the Marshalls means bases from which we can invade the Marianas. Control of the Marianas means bases from which we can attack Japan herself. This is the Central Pacific pattern. The center of the pattern is the American aircraft carrier. The planes are armed and ready. The Army Air Force has already bombed Tarawa. The naval carriers will finish the job. The naval pilots are told there is the suspicion the Japanese have abandoned Tarawa. Nevertheless, the bombing and shelling will far exceed anything ever done in the past. Never in the history of warfare will so much high explosive be dropped on so small an area. Against 290 Japanese acres, we launch 200 planes. Within 7 minutes, the few enemy planes on the airstrip are knocked out. The island is bombed and the returning planes report no signs of life. Nevertheless, the fire control centers call for the first of 3,000 tons of naval shells. Yards from the beach. The Marines transfer to the landing craft. The run-in has been timed for high tide so that the heavier ships can sail over the coral reef. 6,000 yards. The first error is apparent. The tide is moving in the wrong direction. It is low tide, not high. But there's no answering fire from the beach. The island may be abandoned. 3,000 yards.